Good afternoon, everyone. If there really is one thing to know about me, it's that I love my family and food, of course. When I was younger, growing up, I would always look forward to my next family gathering. You know, as you can imagine, I was always sat on the kids' table. We would have Hot Wheels, burgers, and we talk about enjoyable things. The adults, however, talked about more serious things, like jobs and money. But as I started to grow up, I began to realize a striking similarity between these conversations. For instance, on the adults' table, I would commonly hear the dialogue of, X got into this college, therefore X must be smarter than Y. Or, Y got this job, therefore she must be more successful than Z. In fact, we even had this almost instinctual behavior at the dinner table as children. Why did X get more food than I did? Now, you see, we do this all the time, and just like my addiction with Candy Crush, the comparison game really is a dangerous one. We do this routinely to each other with almost every issue under the sun. We do it in the classroom, we do it outside of the classroom, and we do it to each other in our day-to-day discourse. Now, that example might come across as being simple or even trivial to you. But honestly, from the kitchen table to the classroom, we do this to each other. Growing up, I've heard the common phrase that without comparison, there is no improvement. But honestly, I beg to differ on that notion because whilst I used to compare my results and my achievement with my friends and my peers, it hardly did anything because I expected to feel a rush of adrenaline, almost a permanent sense of joy if I did better than them. But honestly, I didn't feel that. And now, grown up, I've started to think to myself, how could we possibly equate our own academic success with others? And why do we always search for comparison, especially as students, to either achieve short-lived happiness or long-lived embitterment? And should always such a short-term victory take precedence over improvement and progression? Well, honestly, it shouldn't. Because as students, we should recognize that we as students ourselves are individual entities, and nothing can separate that. So we commonly think to ourselves, why do we do this? Why do we always compare? Perhaps I can suggest two main reasons. First, it's the concept of our value system. Research from the Netherlands has shown that our value system, especially inside the classroom, is based hugely on three main components. 1, parental pressure. 2, academic performance. And last, but definitely not least, perceived teacher concern with achievement. And as a result of a combination of these factors, the typical classroom has almost become a battlefield. It's become an evaluative atmosphere that evokes a strong interest in young children to young adults to compare themselves. In fact, we do it on a day-to-day basis. It's like, what did you get on your test? How did you do on your SATs? Dialogue like that has almost become the norm. Conversation like that has become the norm. In fact, a study conducted in 2013 just looked at that precisely, and it talked about how social comparison affects our perception of each other's achievements. And in that very study, students were given the option to tick a box at the very end of their test, and that would raise their test score by 0.567%. And in the context of that study, that would have raised their GPA by, say, 0.5, meaning that students who may have previously been on the cusp of an A minus can maybe go up to an A. Now, that almost sounds way too good to be true, right? I mean, after all, you are getting a free increase in your grades. But no, the majority of these students, well, 41% of them actually rejected this proposal. And what's striking is that it tended to be the top 50% of the class, the higher performing half, that were more likely to reject this. And researchers concluded that this was because of the fact that higher achieving students were more likely to fear social comparison. Higher achieving students were more prone to social comparison, and as a result, felt more insecure about their own ability. Now, I'm looking around and some of my friends might look a bit guilty of this. They do it, we do it, on a routine basis. And honestly, I can't blame you, because it's just so easy and common for all of us to do. But it still doesn't stop us, and it really shouldn't excuse us from the responsibility that all of us have to call out comparison culture once and for all. And it still hasn't stopped us from asking the comparative question of how you did on that test. And as a result, I have seen my friends plummet from feeling pretty content about themselves to feeling absolutely racked with self-doubt after peering into the seemingly perfect lives of others. And I've seen family break down during college application season due to the profiles and the numbers that people broadcast online, be it on YouTube or on other social media platforms. Gone is our appreciation of what we used to cherish, replaced instead with an appetite of seeking unachievable perfection, based hugely, if not entirely, on the expectations of people we might not even care about. The second reason is that we always want more. Students do this especially, and it seems like we have a seemingly unending desire to always wish for more. You know, the car is never fast enough, the view never good enough, the house is never big enough either. But why is this? In 2010, a study was conducted and it found that the higher your income rank, the more happier you are. Now, supposedly that's true enough, intuitive, money, happiness, correlation in between. But here's the thing. In 2013, an extension of that study was conducted, and it found that it isn't necessarily how much you earn that affects your overall life satisfaction. It's how much you earn in comparison to your peers. This is actually really interesting because in 2013, a study was conducted with Harvard students, and they were given two main options. The first option was that they could get $50,000 and all of their friends would get $25,000. The second option, they would get double. They would get $100,000 and everyone else would get $250,000. Now, numerically speaking, 100,000 is a lot more, in fact, double a 50. So because of our wide belief that money buys happiness, surely we'd go for option two, right? Well, that really wasn't the case, because the majority of these students actually chose the first option. Because in today's world, because we are so prone to social comparison, we would rather if other people had less, just so we could have more. In fact, not even more, but just more than them. It's always just more than something. More than you, more than me. Similarly, in 1996, Clark and Oswald did another study, and they surveyed 5,000 British workers across various occupations. And what was found is that it's how much you earn compared to others that affected your overall life satisfaction. Because once the coworkers found out that they were not making as much as their peers, even if it had no effect on how much they were making themselves. They would feel less satisfied with their job. And as a result, yesterday's appreciation and happiness becomes today's misery and doubt. It seems like we never have enough. Now, we tend to always turn a deaf ear towards the social comparisons we make. And it's mainly because it's been so common and so present that it seems to be indistinguishable from our day-to-day discourse. You know, even with the younger students that I mentor in and out of school, I think, you know what? They're just kids. If they like to compare themselves, they can compare. But my former English teacher once warned me of something insightful, but alarming, when he once asked me, if we let our students and if we let our kids continue to compare themselves, continue to accept comparison culture, wouldn't it be way too late to get it out of them, say, in their later teenage years? Because sometimes you just realize that it's too late already. And though that sounds heartbreaking, it's painfully true. Perhaps this is the reason why cyberbullying is one of the largest causes of social media-caused depression. Perhaps comparison culture is the reason why 36% of all social media users, especially teenagers, attempt or commit suicide after seeing the seemingly perfect lives of other people on social media. Perhaps comparison culture is the reason why these children sacrifice their lives even at the young age of 7 years old. And that's right, 7, on social media. So how can we solve this together, you and me? Well, I would actually like to echo a phrase that I feel should be a mantra for all of us teenagers. It's actually from a song lyric that I like. Do what's good for you, or you're no good for anybody. That sounds abstract, it really isn't. So what does that mean? First, it means that we have to start by rejecting language that forms the proposition of a comparison. Language such as X's are better than Y's. This is a generalization, but also an unjustified comparison. Because the language we use and the rational discourse that we engage in defines and influences the way in which we vision our world. You see, it's so common. It's so easy to utter a comparison. It's so easy to just slip off the tongue. But that should change. You know, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say, I think some of you might have started to compare me with the other speakers the minute I walked up here. You know, the speaker before me, and maybe you will do so for the speaker after me too. But here's the thing. You can't really do that. You simply can't. You just can't. The reason is because, as speakers, we are individual entities. We have individual stories. We have individual backgrounds. And echoing the slogan for TED, we all have individual ideas worth sharing. So yes, you can't compare us, but what you can do is that you can start to understand the importance of context. Dr. Laurie Santos of Yale University pointed out something insightful when she stated the importance of our reference points, which are the points that we commonly use to determine or to measure our success based on others. For instance, as a student, I might use other higher achieving students as a reference point to measure my own success. However, at times, that isn't really healthy because we're neglecting what's supposed to be important. Us, ourselves, understanding ourselves, understanding our achievement and our effort. And to offer a solution to this, I would like to echo one of Dr. Jordan Peterson's 12 rules of life. This was his 4th rule. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Rather than use other people as a reference point, use yourself. Because who else knows yourself better than you do, right? He once memorably spoke about his former client who came in to see him, and this former client was feeling depressed. He wasn't feeling as fulfilled, he wasn't feeling as successful as his former college roommate. Now here's the thing, his roommate was Elon Musk. So, I mean, yes, you aren't as successful as Elon Musk, and yes, you may not be as fulfilled as him, but so are 7 billion other people on this planet. So again, it's important that we recognize the validity of our reference points. And in his words, because of the growing age of comparison culture, perhaps we overvalue what we don't have and undervalue what we do and what we should appreciate. Because in the present, in the fast-changing nature of our world, we seem to ignore or at times neglect what really we should be cherishing. Now, don't get me wrong, it really isn't easy. It wasn't easy, it isn't easy, and it won't be. Because being vulnerable and opening up yourself to honest and truthful flaws is a deeply uncomfortable and, yes, admittedly intimidating experience. But it's a brave one too. Because even today, as I stand up here as a 17-year-old talking to all of you about comparison culture, I still can't settle on a meaningful or a definite emotion towards the growing nature of comparison culture. Let us not be tricked by it. Let us not be tricked by how common it is, and let's call this out together. Because we need to start, because if we don't, who will, right? You've got two options. You can either burden yourself with unrealistic expectations based on people's expectations that you may have never even acknowledged before, or don't. Be prepared to call out comparison culture on others and yourself, and be aware of it. Because maybe if we can all do this together as a generation, and for the generations to come, one day we can be role models beyond compare. Thank you. 谢谢大家。
感谢 Larrissa 带来的精彩演讲。